Some Buckeye fans have already thrown the first shovel full of dirt on the grave. Many out there. We will try to bring you back to life a little bit, possibly during this hour, or throw a few more shovels of dirt. I don't know what these guys are going to say about that performance, but 23-3 certainly would be good enough for a number of teams across the country. Ohio State still with championship aspirations, I believe, are 1-0 in the Big Ten. We'll talk Indiana. We'll talk not necessarily Youngstown State, but you know what the deal is, how the Buckeyes are going to work through Saturday's situation. We got Buckeyes live right here at the Voice of College Football as always. Lock it in at 11 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday. Hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live. Sometimes we got to switch it up, but we come here every week at some point. Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports. Tony Gerdeman. It's Buckeye Huddle. It's Buckeye Weekly. Bad name for the show, Tony, because you get it multiple times per week, but it's Buckeye Weekly, and it's the College Football Playbook. Get over there right here on YouTube. Check it out, College Football Playbook. All right, guys, how we doing today?
Outstanding.
Doing well.
Outstanding. You're not supposed to be outstanding, Steve.
Week 2 of the season.
Lousy on
we're fresh as
Saturday.
a daisy. We're ready to go. Yeah. Better than the football team.
So, Steve, let's take it through Saturday situation and the follow-up in regards to post-game comments and the news conference after that in regards to your biggest takes. I think we got to start at quarterback.
Yeah, I think it was a tough day, obviously, for Ohio State offensively, and that began with Kyle McCord at quarterback. 20 of 33. He made some good throws. He missed on some other throws and some other reads, and just kind of an up and down day. And where Ryan Day had hoped to get Devin Brown into the game as well, the way the game was going, where it was 7-3 late in the first half, Indiana made just an amazingly galactically stupid decision to go for it on fourth down with about a minute and a half to go instead of putting the ball inside the 10-yard line and going into halftime trailing 7-3. They gave Ohio State good field position. The Buckeyes went down and kicked a field goal. It's 10-3, but the Buckeyes really didn't put this game away until late in the third quarter, early fourth quarter. And so it was a 4-quarter game. The plan to rotate quarterbacks was scuttled because Ryan Day was simply just trying to get out of Indiana with more points than Indiana. Indiana had one of the worst offenses that we're going to see. And I made this comment on our radio show this morning. The defense played outstanding, but let's don't crown them just yet like we tried to crown them last year after they rolled through the murderer's row of Notre Dame, Rutgers, Northwestern, Iowa, Indiana, who none of which could get a first down. And you thought, we've got something with this defense. The defense actually looked and felt a lot better. The offense, back to the initial question, did not look and feel a lot better. It was 3 steps backward from what we've seen Ohio State put on the field in recent years under Ryan Day. Some of that was Kyle McCord. A lot of that was the offensive line. Running game that was just stop and start all day long, and a lot of reasons, a lot of things that go into this. So it's back to the drawing board, I think, for Ohio State offensively as they go into week 2 against Youngstown State, a team that they should beat. The 2 previous times they played them, it was 38-6, 43-0. So figure it's going to be in that realm, so to speak. And Ohio State's got to get back to being a little bit more consistent on offense and show that they're competent. I think competence would be a good first step for the Ohio State offense.
Dare to dream. What Kyle McCord did, just looking, I jotted down his just the distance the ball traveled through the air on all 33 of his passes. And in the first half, he only had 2 passes that went only had like 2 or 3 passes that went beyond 10 yards until the final drive, the final minute when they're throwing, trying to throw into the end zone there. And so it was a lot of short passing for him. He got more courageous and more adventurous in the second half. But 20 of his, I think 20 of his 33 throws were under 10 yards through the air. And so that gives you an idea of the lack of time he had to throw at times, perhaps just the lack of patience. First start since 2021. We know Ohio State runs a lot of slow developing routes, long developing routes, because they like to go downfield. So you have to stay in there and you have to wait for it. And, he was throwing a lot of short passes. Like 11 of his 33 passes were 4 yards or under 4 yards. So that they're going to throw some short stuff for the screen. But then in the second half, you saw him going downfield more. And he was, I believe, 10 of 16 for 145 yards in the second half, not including the Marvin Harrison touchdown that got removed. So he was more comfortable in the second half. I think Ryan Day needs to get more comfortable with him in terms of the play calling. And I think everybody needs to get more comfortable with the offensive line, including the offensive line. And I think it was disappointing that Matt Jones and Donovan Jackson, neither one of those two guys graded out a champion. Those are veterans. They are returning starters. They should have played better than they did. So, we could talk about, and we will talk about Josh Simmons, but the fact that those two guys weren't able to get any kind of push or create enough holes for the running backs, I think it's not concerning yet, because as Ryan Day said, everything is fixable. But that was surprising that they weren't able to be more forceful. But it only takes one weak link in the offensive line to kind of screw everything. But I'll stop there. I'll let Kevin talk, and then eventually we'll start talking about the defense again.
Yeah, sorry I'm late. I did a software update and I was logged out of everything. So I was trying to find passwords to get here and get on the show. At risk of repeating things that both Steve and Tony said, it's kind of a bit of a chicken or egg situation. Is it a case that Ryan Day is not comfortable with Kyle McCord to call certain plays? Is it a case of Kyle McCord is not comfortable with Ryan Day or the offense to make certain passes? I think everybody probably was not very comfortable with the overall performance of the offensive line. You have quite, honestly, the top two receivers in the nation in Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, and you get 5 total receptions there. I know Marv was targeted 8 times. I mean, obviously he had the one play where he was sort of kind of forced out of bounds, but didn't fight hard enough to get back in, or whatever that was that took a touchdown off the board. First starts are first starts, and we can sit there and look back to Akron in 2021 and say, well, Kyle McCord has already played a game. Well, yes and no. So I went back and I looked at some numbers of quarterbacks in their first start, and we're not too far out of line. And generally, from game 1 to game 2, we're seeing about a 6 to 8% increase in completion percentages. So if we take that in the middle, suddenly Kyle McCord is a 67% completion rate, which is still a little south of the 70 that Ryan Day would like to have his quarterbacks at, but I mean is certainly better. There were a lot of things that needed to be addressed in that game, but the good news is, to steal a line from somebody who spent some time in Columbus, the best part of being 1-0 is the opportunity to go 2-0 and ask Clemson what it's like to play a conference game on the road. And you're gonna get a very different tone coming out of that sleepy little town in South Carolina.
Maybe I shouldn't have done. This is not a fair comparison, but I'm going to make it anyway, because I took in the Michigan game to a certain extent, or the cut down version, before a podcast yesterday, because I was not watching Michigan at noon on Saturday, certainly, but on Peacock versus TCU Colorado. Anyway, take that in, and just not just the precision, the conviction to which JJ McCarthy's throwing these passes. Like, he's sold on these throws, confident, throwing lasers all over the place. Now, I do not believe that JJ McCarthy has a stronger arm than Kyle McCord, based on them both being elite recruits. Now, maybe he's developed that throwing talent to a certain extent. I know that he has. So Kyle McCord just didn't seem to throw with much conviction. He was a bit hesitant. That ball that he threw to Marvin Harrison at the goal line, where he should have, best receiver in the country, huge frame. There's all that space behind him, the pylon. That's where you throw that ball, not down near his knees. A lot of the balls that you talked about, Tony, the very short throws, wasn't like they were crossing routes where guys had a chance to run with it. They were kind of squared up and boom, they're just catching the ball, getting tackled on the spot. A little bit later there in the second half, it seemed like he started to toss it downfield with a little bit more confidence. Cade Stover and others. Cardinal Tate dropped a ball that probably would have led to a touchdown around the 2-yard line at the end of the first half. So, Kevin, we're going to tee you up on this one. The use of Devin Brown or the lack thereof.
Well, here's the situation. I hate scripted situations. You're going to come in at X, Y, and Z doesn't necessarily agree with me. I think that the number one goal is to win the game. And I don't think at any point I won't say any Ohio State fan, because I certainly have read social media for years, and especially this last weekend. But even at 7-3, the game never was in doubt in my mind. Ohio State was going to wake up at least at some point and put a few points on the board. And I'm going to underline the word few, because 23 certainly was not enough, having to settle for 3 field goals. I've been there, got the T-shirt. It's all. I mean, we've seen all of that, but I think that we know what the pecking order really is, though. I mean, because you don't want to bring Devin Brown in a situation of where you're backed up inside the 5, or you don't want to necessarily do it coming off of a really bad series and getting in Kyle McCord of having a situation of where it's like, well, I got sent to the bench for this series. And I know I was told ahead of time that it was going to be Devin's series, but I really would like to redeem myself after a bad series. So, again, I think that everybody likes the devil they don't know versus the devil they do know. We're not that many years removed from where everybody thought that Kyle McCord was the savior and C.J. Stroud was was not the answer. And now the roles have flipped, and people think that Devin Brown is the answer and that Kyle McCord is not, as the cats are fighting in here. So, again, I think that the most important thing at this point is finding who your quarterback is. And if your determination is that you're going to ride or die with Kyle McCord, then that's what you got to do. And that doesn't mean that I'm not saying that Devin Brown shouldn't see time with the first team offense, or at least the first team offense playbook. But you can't be waffling as you're trying to sit there and fix the plane at 35,000 feet. You've got to ride with the equipment that you've got. You're not going to be able to sit there and make wholesale changes at that point. So, and that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I think you tell the quarterbacks what you're planning to do. But as Ryan Day told us, those plans can go out the window once the game starts. And the reason I said this before, but the reason coaches hate these quarterback things is because there's no right way to handle it, and almost every way to handle it is wrong. And we always see where coaches are like, yeah, we want to get the second guy in on the third drive. I don't know why it's the third drive, or I don't know why that has been the target, and that was the target for Devin Brown. But Kyle McCord and the offense going 3 and out on the second drive, you want to build some rhythm, so they keep him in there. And then in the third quarter, when they had some rhythm, you have to keep him in there because there's rhythm. So what the best time to pull him, I guess, would be a touchdown drive with a second drive, and then you go ahead and bring in Devin Brown on a high sort of thing. But you can't. It didn't happen, and so then you try to work around it, and you try to keep your quarterbacks updated. But as Kyle McCord said after the game, like when he was asked, did you know, like, how did you prepare to come out of the game? He's like, you just prepare to go back in every single time until they tell you, you're going to sit on the sideline for this one. And so there's no great way of doing this. The only right way to do it is to get a win out of it, honestly, and then move on.
Yeah, I had no issue with how they handled it. I think that, again, as I said in my opening statement, that this was a competitive game. It was 7-3 right before halftime. And so do you, by jockeying quarterbacks, run the risk of making a mistake that leads to Indiana taking the lead and ultimately upsetting you? And that's what Clemson found out. They could not grab control of that game against Duke. They fought and fought and fought and tried, but kept turning it over in the red zone. And Duke eventually took the lead, and it was an avalanche of momentum, and Clemson never got back in the game. That was the last thing that Ryan Day wanted to see. So he made the decision to stick with Kyle McCord. Now, flipping forward to this week, it sounds like Kyle McCord's going to start the game, but he still hasn't been anointed as the starter, the permanent answer to all their issues and problems. So what that tells me is, in a perfect world, that Kyle McCord might get to play the first and third quarters. And if they are up, Devin Brown would get to play the second and fourth quarters. Maybe both of them would get 35 snaps. Both of them would get 15 or 20 throws. And now you've got some data, albeit against a much lesser opponent, Youngstown State, but still live game data throwing to the Ohio State receivers of what is possible with these guys. And you can start to formulate some opinions. And I think by the time the Western Kentucky game ends in a week and a half, that's when the verdict has to be in. You have to walk off that field against Western Kentucky knowing you have somebody who is capable of going into South Bend and beating Notre Dame. And I haven't really given that game a whole lot of thought yet, other than the fact that Sam Hartman makes them legitimate to a feeling at Notre Dame. And we'll know more about them after they play NC State on the road this weekend. I see they're like a touchdown favorite, and most of the money, according to one early response, was on Notre Dame to cover 7 or whatever on the road at NC State, which is interesting. But so I want to see these guys flourish in this situation this week against Youngstown State, and it doesn't matter the name of the opponent. As Coach Day said, more times than not, it's not about who we're playing, it's how we're playing, and that determines, the outcome. So, and that's the case when you've got better players. So if the better players show up, I mean, you contrast what we saw. Indiana's guys on defense were playing with their hair on fire. Ohio State's guys on defense were playing with their hair on fire. Indiana's guys on offense, that they're gonna have a lot. They're gonna look like Iowa. They're gonna have a lot of games where they give up 17 points and lose this year. Their defense is going to keep them in a lot of games, and they're going to struggle to score 10 points because they're not any good at all. But the Ohio State offense, by contrast to those other two units, they played tentative. They played like they didn't know what they were supposed to do. They played like they'd never been in that situation before. They played like Indiana showed them things they'd never seen, and they were ill prepared for what Indiana brought. And that's 1 through 11 on the Ohio State offense.
I will say regarding the Kyle McCord, JJ McCarthy, like obviously JJ McCarthy looked completely comfortable in that game, which he should, because it was his 13th, 14th start compared to where Kyle McCord is at this point. So I think if he can get to that point, if Kyle McCord can get to that point in the season, that would be great for Ohio State. But I also think it's worth noting that Ohio State ran the ball better against Indiana than Michigan did against East Carolina. So I'll just throw that out there for the folks in the chat.
Jordan is going to throw this one out. Tired of this quarterback controversy crap. Just announced Tony or Steve as the starting quarterback already. Sheesh. And Jordan probably didn't think he had the option of Kevin at the time, but throw Kevin in the mix.
No, Jordan is 2023 is the year that Jordan has decided to go after me. So he probably would not want me starting.
He would.
I can speak for myself. I'm nothing short of an interception machine. So you don't want me under center or behind center. So
I did throw an interception in intramurals, brother.
Ryan, appreciate you being here, as well as Jordan. Jordan, thank you. Ryan, thank you as well for the contribution. What does Ohio State need to do against Youngstown State? A perfect game. Quote, it feels like there is a bad aftertaste from their performance against IU.
I don't think it has to be a perfect game.
There's no such thing.
Yeah. I think that you just need to play like you're capable. Play a better game. I mean, you only get 12 of these opportunities that are guaranteed in the regular season. You need to make the most of them. You need to get something out of this, and that is sharpening the starters, particularly on offense, and then developing some depth. I mean, those are the two things that you want to do in this game. And when you go to the bench and you go to your backup players and you go to your freshmen, having problems talking, and your redshirt freshmen, it's not going to be perfect. This is the first time for a lot of these guys to be on the field, and they're going to drop passes, and they may fumble the ball, and they may get beat for a touchdown or whatever. But, you got to go play football, and that's what this is about. I just want to see – I mean, to me, that – and again, I don't want to make excuses for anybody, but it was 88 degrees and it felt like 105 on the field. Our photographer after the game said it was some of the most adverse conditions he'd ever seen at a college football game. And so I think you have to factor some of that into the equation about how sluggish the offense was, is that, fatigue and the heat are going to make you, tentative and make you, drive down your energy level. Shouldn't be like that this week. It's going to be about 73 degrees at Ohio State on Saturday. Perfect day for football. Go out and play, as we said, like your hair's on fire. And don't be afraid to make mistakes, but go turn it loose. That's what we need to see from the offense. Go turn it loose. And if that means 600 yards and 50 points at the end of the day, then so be it. If it only means 40 points. I mean, they only scored 38 points against Youngstown State the first time they ever played them. And that was with, a 2017 that went on and played for the national championship that year. So, go out and turn it loose. That's what I want to see on Saturday.
I don't think the score matters to me, because it's not about scoring. You can score ugly, and that doesn't mean squat. I think it's a matter of just coming out there and having a command of your game. It's a command of coming out and looking competent and having faith in your system and executing the system and making your reads and making your second reads or making your third reads. It's about the offensive line holding up. It's about the defensive line doing what it does. I mean, I went through the numbers of Youngstown State against Valpo, and it was much heavier run than pass. So I don't need to see 8 quarterback sacks if Youngstown State is going to be content running the ball. That's just not how it necessarily works. I want to see a continuation of the defense playing the way that it did. Youngstown State rushed for more than 300 yards against Valpo. I mean, what's the magic number for Ohio State to hold them to? 65, 70? I don't know. The score isn't going to be the yardstick for me. It's going to be just the way that they play, minimizing mistakes and showing confidence, showing growth. We talk about so much going from game 1 to game 2 and everything. That's the time that you could see the most, upward mobility. Well, they need to show that upward mobility in that game, and then moving forward the next week, they'll go against a team that's known for its passing chops. And then that'll be a chance to see what Burke and Hancock and Nick Benison are all about. I mean, so there are certainly going to be opportunities there. I'm not as concerned about the score, not a line to my knowledge as of yet, being an FCS opponent. So none of that necessarily matters. And if you're betting on this game, for a score, you're bigger degenerate than me, and that's saying a lot. So I just think that it's a case of, you just want to see a team that comes out there and shows a great amount of competency.
Well, and as Ryan Day said, it's about us. It's about Ohio State and what they do. And I wonder how many coaches even know a name on Youngstown State's roster? Like, does Tony Alford know any of the linebackers? Does Ryan Day know anybody on defense for Youngstown State? Because right now the focus, obviously, they're scouting and things like that, but it's about what Ohio State does. It's about becoming a more efficient running team. As Day said, they were like 50% on 3rd and 4th and short on Saturday. That's not good enough. You've got to get, you've got to get more yards than they have been. You've got to convert. I do think this will be the spring game that everybody wanted but didn't get to see with Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. And so everybody will be able to make their decisions at that point on, confirm their thoughts on the quarterback situation if they could see enough of Devin Brown. And so I'm looking forward to that. I think they should at least, if Devin Brown doesn't get at least a quarter and a half, what's the point? What are you paying Youngstown State to come to town for anyway? If you really want to see him, then you've got to put him out there, and you've got to allow these guys to go ahead and be aggressive. As Steve said, if you make some mistakes, it's not like the defense is going to be put in a situation where they're going to give up 28 points and you can't score 31 to win. Like, go ahead and be aggressive, take some shots, take some chances, allow your athletes to be superior down the field and win some 50-50 balls. Or because honestly, should there even be 50-50 balls downfield with these receivers? It's probably 65-35 at best. So give them an opportunity to go and make some plays. Give Kyle McCord an opportunity to get more and more confident. And if you want more possessions, then take more shots. Make these quicker possessions, get up and down the field, and then get the ball back. That's if you want to see as much as you can from everybody, go up and down the field as quickly as possible, score, and then go force a 3 and out, and you get the ball right back, and you can figure some more stuff out on the next drive.
We'll combine some of these David Greenshield questions along with a thought I had, because at some point in that game I was thinking, when is the last time I saw an Ohio State quarterback under center as many times as I've seen Kyle McCord? I thought it has to be pre-Urban Meyer. And David Greenshield's also asking about, didn't run tempo. Also asking about the perimeter blocking. Those seem to be a few other concerns, or just adjustments to the offense.
I'm going to make a comment about the up-tempo. Everyone's wrapped around the axle about the new timing rules. And when you think about the timing rules, let's say in a given game there's 30 first downs that end up with the ball inbounds and the clock running. And then they would, after 7 seconds, put the ball down and roll the clock under the old rules. So that's, 3 minutes of clock time that's been taken out of this game, basically, because the clock never stops. And it's taken a few plays, maybe 2 possessions and 6, 8, 10 plays from each team in the course of the game. And you know how you negate that? By going up tempo, by snapping the ball at 15 on the play clock. Too many times Ohio State let that thing, they would get to the line of scrimmage with 20 and go, and then turn and look over to the sideline to, for 15 seconds to get the call. Bull crap, in my opinion. If you've got the better team and you want to jump on somebody and the conditions are adverse, and I don't give a crap what these people posted about, don't make the excuse about the conditions impact different people differently, okay? And if the conditions are adverse and you got the better team, attack. And Ohio State was tentative. Ohio State was passive in their offensive display in this game. And that isn't going to get it done against Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Penn State, or Michigan. You're going to go 1-3 in those 4 games if you play offense like you did in this game. And you negate the clock rules, cutting down the number of plays by knowing what you want to do, everybody being on the same page, and going out and executing. And they didn't do any of that. They got a D on all 3 of those margins, in my opinion. So I agree 100% with David. Go up tempo. At least have some tempo. You're running a play every 40 seconds. I mean, you've negated your advantage, in my opinion, when you do that.
You just got your training wheels off and you want to play in the GDX games is what you're saying. You can't do that. You can't do that. You got a guy that you're still trying to bring along. And if you probably, he probably knows the play calls and everything. This isn't the NFL where every play call is like, 500 syllables or anything like that. I don't know if I necessarily want to go machine gun rate at that point. Now, I will agree with Steve that it felt like there was a massive lack of urgency. And you can have an up tempo offense to the point of showing urgency, but coming out there and running plays every 17 seconds, I don't think is something that you're going to be doing with a first-time starter. You just can't do that. Now, could you get to a point of where you're feeling more comfortable with tempo when you go to Notre Dame? Absolutely. Do you need to sit there and maybe try some things out so you're not sitting there trying to snowboard the half pipe against Notre Dame? Yeah, probably. But in game one with adverse situations and a game that, yes, they got Ohio State scored right off the bat, and then everything kind of went to hell at that point. I don't know if I'm necessarily trying to, put a rise on the degree of difficulty at that point. So I have misgivings about that.
I think offensively on the road, you design it all week and you've got all these grand plans for everything you're going to do. And I would equate it to going on vacation, going to the beach for a week or wherever. And you have all of these things that you want to go do. I want to go see this. I want to go do this. And by like day 2 or day 3, you're like, you know what? I'm kind of tired. I just want to chill. I just want to relax. And by like day 6, you're just like, I just want to go home now. I'm ready to be home. And I think when coaches, they have these grand plans of what they want to do on the road. But once they get there and it's like, well, this is a little bit tougher than I expected, then it's just like, I just want to get home. I just want to get home the easiest way possible, the most sure way possible. Let's just, we'd love to have more plays, but you also don't want to put the defense in a bad situation. Although I think the way Indiana's offense was going, you couldn't put the Ohio State defense in a bad situation. So I'm interested to see how that evolves, because I do think, as I asked Ryan Day on Tuesday, because I asked him about the possessions and how do you keep from chasing possessions, because last year against Indiana, they had 15. This year against Indiana, they had 10. And 2 of those were at the end of the first half and the end of the game, when really, like, one was like a 38-second drive. The other was like a 1:40 or something like that. So if Indiana gets a first down at the wrong time, you're talking 8 or 9 drives for Ohio State in this last game. Or if Ohio State gets some more first downs, you're talking 8 or 9 drives in a game. And so you, as Ryan Day told me, you said you have to execute. He told the team, we have to execute better and be more efficient, because our drives are going to be, the number is going to be smaller, especially when Ohio State likes to defer. So they may only get 4 drives in the first half in some of these games, because now it's easier to weaponize the clock if an offense wants to. But I think Ohio State was also okay having the clock weaponized and doing some of it as well. I do think at this point we are making too much of the clock roll, and I'm one of the most guilty parties. But when you look at the fact that at no time last year in any games did Ohio State have fewer than 11 drives, and then the first game this year they had 10, and with a couple of first downs on any drive, that could have been 7, 8, 9 instead of 10. Like, that's a concerning thing, especially when you have an offense that is breaking in some guys and would like to get as much experience as possible, score as many points as possible. And now you don't have nearly the number of drives that you are used to. You've got to find those points somewhere, but you have to find them in the same, in fewer drives. So you just have to be more efficient and expect scoring to be down.
You're muted,
Mark.
You're still muted.
We can't hear you, Mark.
Sorry, Kevin. I kept talking when you were talking, so I didn't hear what you were telling me. All right. I said I was going to answer this question first. Brian, you might be right. it's not out of the realm of possibility that they lose 3 games, especially like Steve said, the way they played offense on Saturday. But my goodness, can we just back off a little bit?
He's a
I
Michigan
posted a
fan.
list of games on Twitter to say these are national championship or playoff teams that had near misses or losses against marginal teams in September. Yeah, I walked into my boss's office the day after they played and lost to Virginia Tech in 2014 because my off days were Friday, Saturday. I said, I need Monday off, January 10th or whatever the date was. And he's like, why? And I said, because Ohio State's playing in the national championship game. Who would have thought that? Did I really believe that? I kind of was wanting to speak it into existence. So thank me, everyone. So yeah. Teams are different. I don't think they're lining up for the playoffs next week. Sometimes teams are different.
And
3 months later.
And as Kevin said, Brian is a Michigan fan, and if anybody knows what a 9-win team looks like, it's going to be a Michigan fan. So this is take the that expert viewership in mind. But I think Ohio State wins at least 9 games. So I would agree on that. But it's not a perfect team yet. It doesn't have to be a perfect team. I bet there'll be a 3-win team heading to Notre Dame, though. That's just my guess.
They sell the Michigan hive mind at Walmart, apparently, because they all share it. And it's really funny because they all will also go on and on and on about, is this Ryan Day's final year? And if they think that Ryan Day is such an inferior coach, maybe they should want him to get a lifetime extension instead of trying to run him out. But again, that might be Wolverine 2.0, and a lot of guys have not necessarily advanced to that class.
Oh, come on, Steve. You got to have something to say to this.
Yeah, I think this is an overreaction. I think, a lot of football to be played in 2 weeks here to get it figured out. I mean, we're going to know a lot about this team in the first 5 games because I had Wisconsin slated in the wrong spot. Notre Dame is 4 and then Maryland 5. So Wisconsin's a little further on, but we're going to know a lot more about, where this season is headed after Notre Dame. And so, either they're going to get it worked out or they're not. And they're playing the best players they think that they have, it seems. I have one guy came on our message board and said, you go tell Ryan Day the fans want Tegra Toshbola and Luke Montgomery to play tackle. And I'm like, they saw them all side by side for a month and decided that Josh Simmons was the best of the group. And, did he play very well in the first game? Heavens no. But, to their way of thinking, he's still the best option that they have. So all you can do is coach him up, develop him, and hope that he can get his, stuff together and play better football each week going forward. That's all they can do. Putting it all on him, I think, is a little disingenuous. I think, did he have some really glaring bad plays? Sure. But, they all did. So, it's a long season, and that tape will teach them a lot of lessons that they're going to put into good use in the weeks ahead.
I don't want to take anything away from this defense because they can only defend what's in front of them, and they did a pretty damn good job at 3 points. This thrown together at the last minute option offense that Tom Allen threw out there was, Ryan Day made the comment, our offense looked clunky. What looked clunky was Indiana trying to run the option. That the option is just poetry in motion when run by the service academies and Paul Johnson back in the day at Georgia Tech, where the sleight of hand of the quarterback and the spacing and the fluidity, it's just beautiful to watch. Well, they were like, the quarterback trying to, what should I do? It's just awful to watch and obviously easy to defend, Tony.
Yeah, no, they did. I thought there's still the communication aspect and covering all of the pitch men that Ohio State did really, really well, because when I asked Jim Knowles how much did you practice for the triple option? And during practice and camp, he said maybe 5 plays, probably less than that. And so they were able to handle that despite not having really prepared for it. So I think, as he said, that's an indicator that this defense can learn or just apply stuff that he's telling them from upstairs to handle whatever they see. But he also said, like, this game, this offense that they faced is an anomaly, really has no bearing. It's like when you face a Navy or an Army or a triple option, like you throw this game away in terms of what you're going to do the rest of the year. And as he said, like they still need to see just a regular, basic, standard offense and see how their pass rush is, see how their coverage is. And you'll get a little glimpse, maybe. I'm not even sure I haven't looked at anything regarding Youngstown State yet. I know Kevin has, but the contrast from Indiana to Western Kentucky is going to be stark. And so that's when we'll know a lot more about this Ohio State secondary, more about the pass rush, more about everything, and just how well they withhold the constant barrage of the passing game. And I think that might be where we start to see a shift from Josh Proctor to Malik Hartford there at free safety. And so I think there's going to be we'll know much more after that game. And yet it's still just Western Kentucky. So what will exactly for the rest of the season based on that, I don't know, but we'll have a better baseline of what they can do against the run and the pass once we see them in their friend against Western Kentucky.
And, another thing too is that just Steve's earlier point about people wanting to see Luke Montgomery and Tegra Shabola out there. I've certainly have heard plenty about people wanting to see CJ Hicks out there at linebacker. When you're going against triple option, that you may be a game ready player, but you may not be ready to go against a triple option if you've practiced it 3 times over the course of this year and maybe never faced it as a high school player. So, things are going to have to matriculate, and you're going to have to be patient with the things that are presented in front of you. And I think that Ohio State's defense did a good job. I mean, let's not forget, talking about 2014, what is this witchcraft? What is this bear defense double eagle that we've never seen before? And Ohio State didn't answer the call. Now, Virginia Tech had more dudes than Indiana could dream of having at that point, even though that wasn't a very good Virginia Tech team, but it was a more talented team. But I think Ohio State did a really good job when it came to shutting down Jalen Lucas, who I think is a pretty solid player. He's not a big player, but certainly very solid. Ohio State maybe didn't answer the bell as well when it came to Indiana's best defensive player, Aaron Casey. I mean, he was a hell of a player, and nobody had an answer for Indiana's punter, the true MVP, as Tony and I were both sitting up there watching pregame warmups, and I looked and I said, holy cripes, that guy can boot. And Tony's like, he's got to be from Australia, and he's from New Zealand, which is close enough. But, those are the 3 best players that Ohio State faced. But, there certainly is there's something to be said about it's just not necessarily plug and play and, well, let's just throw this guy aside and put somebody else in there sight unseen just because he plays the same position. Well, without knowing all the nuances, I mean, you're not necessarily helping the cause, and you could actually be doing more harm than good. And generally you are.
Steve, your thoughts about the defense?
Thought they were outstanding. I thought from the first play, it looked like they knew what they were doing. It looked like they had confidence in the scheme. They were triggering quickly. They were getting to the ball. Multiple hats were getting to the ball. They knocked the quarterback for a 2-yard loss on the first play. Josh Proctor blew it up in the backfield. And then JT Tuimoloau and Sonny Styles cleaned it up. And it really, it got better from there. So, I thought they got their hands on some passes. Denzel Burke was spot on with his coverages. One of the plays of the game, Davison Igbinosun on I think it was a 4th down run or a 3rd and long, triggered and came up and made a play on a draw play to stop the ball carrier at a key point in the game. I think to force a 4th down, I believe is what it was. So that was a good play by a cornerback and run support that really stood out in my mind. no interceptions and only one quarterback sack, and that was by Hero Canoe, a redshirt freshman who really wasn't talked about a whole lot in the preseason. Where does that leave the pass rush? I want to see more. I want to see, obviously inferior opponent this week, and then whatever they are, Sun Belt Conference USA the next week. But I want to see more out of the pass rush. And people made the comment that the defensive line appeared to be slow, getting off blocks and lethargic, perhaps. And I don't know what to say about that. But I guess again, Indiana terrible, Ohio State outstanding on defense, and we want to see it against a real offense. The real test will be in 2.5 weeks against Notre Dame. Although we'll say Western Kentucky had a 4,000-yard passer last year. So their pass defense is going to get tested before they play Notre Dame.
I'll talk Ohio State defense here in a second, but to the question about Aaron Casey, he is a redshirt senior plus, according to the Indiana roster, whatever the hell that is. So like 9th year senior or something. So no, he's not transferring anywhere. But then again, the way that the NC2A and the COVID year and everything else, there are going to be a lot of guys out there that are going to have doctor on their jerseys because that's how long they're staying in college. But as for Ohio State's defense, one thing I will say is people were upset about, quote unquote, the sack production. I'm not really sure how you get sacks in the triple option per se, because it is not a passing offense all that much. So, there's something to be said there. I think the defense did what it needed to. One of the things that kind of stood out to me was Davis Enigbenosin had a PI call that was pretty obvious, but Jim Knowles said that, you got a handsy kind of guy, a physical type of corner. I mean, 6'2", big corner. You work on technique. You do not coach away the aggressiveness, but you do coach up the technique. I think he got into a couple of bad positions on a couple of plays too. There's going to be a little bit of a learning curve there. I'll be curious to see when Jihad Carter gets into the mix at safety. I think that's going to be something that's important. But overall, as inept as you want to call the Indiana offense, and time will be the ultimate arbiter of that when we see what the numbers look like in 2 weeks and 4 weeks and 8 weeks and at the end of the season. I think Ohio State did what it needed to do. You can't go out there and create matter. You can only deal with what's in front of you. And I think Ohio State did a good job of that. I think that Ohio State's numbers are going to be equally good going against this Youngstown State offense this upcoming weekend. 52 points against Valpo, notwithstanding. But, I think that the first test in terms of maybe giving up some points, not necessarily a game being in question, will be Western Kentucky. But that's just because they're so vastly different than Indiana and certainly Youngstown State.
I'm going to make the bold prediction that Indiana will average more than 153 yards and 3 points per game.
I would agree with that. We haven't talked about Sonny Styles yet, and I thought he was really good. I tweeted this out, I think yesterday or the day before, but I charted like every position that he lined up on the field, and he's all over the place. Sometimes, mostly, the nickel over the slot, but he was a Sam linebacker a lot. He was attached to the hip of the defensive end as an edge defender a bunch. Saw him on some 3rd and long situations, drop back as a deep safety. And he handled everything really well. The only time I saw him get beaten it was on a 3rd and long or whatever as a safety, and the slot receiver basically just ran right by him, but the quarterback was already getting attacked, so it wasn't an issue. I just wonder how he does in that regard, because he really didn't have to do much of it at all on Saturday. And we even saw the first 3rd and long situation. They pulled him out and put in Cam Martinez. And then they just kind of stuck with Sonny the rest of the game once they realized that, well, it doesn't look like Indiana can throw, so let's just stick with Sonny in there. So I am interested to see how he covers once the real quarterbacks are throwing the ball.
GOJ is asking, about the Ohio State standard. What is the official standard, to use his language? Well, I remember Urban Meyer saying one time that when he got the job, he was handed a sheet of paper by Gene Smith that said, "We've got two goals: win every game, graduate your players." And I've heard Ryan Day say a number of times, "I understand I'm not supposed to lose any games." So I guess that's the standard.
Yeah, I mean that sounds about right. I mean, Urban won 14-1 and won the national championship. That was a pretty good season. You know, I mean, let's think about this in context. 1968, they won the national championship. They didn't win another one for 34 years to 2002, and then it was 12 years to 2014, and now it's been 9 years. So, I mean, when you put it in that kind of context, it's not something that happens every year at Ohio State or really any place. I mean, Alabama's won a few, Clemson won a few here, Georgia's won back-to-back. Ohio State, is in the mix every year. It'd be nice to win one occasionally, but history has told us it's not something that Ohio State has, won every year. And so, the sooner people come to grips with the idea that it'd be great to win it, but maybe just enjoy the games, enjoy the competition, and whatever happens. I mean, did we survive for 34 years without a national championship? Yeah, I think we were okay. Was it optimum? No, not at all. Did they come close several times in that period? Yes, like 5 or 6 times. Would have been great. Have some realistic thought about it, I guess.
We didn't really tear too much into the offensive line. I thought that the pass blocking was sufficient, maybe in the B range, and the run blocking was extremely inconsistent and typically not where it needed to be, both on the edges, but most notably in the middle, where this line was supposed to be stronger. And then we saw, of course, Chip Trainum. If we want to have some positive takes from this game, come into the game in relief of Travion Henderson, and whether it was him or the offensive line just started to move some people out of the way, started to pick up some meaningful yardage.
Yeah, I mean, with the offensive line, we've danced around it. We've dipped our toe in the pool. Just wasn't, it wasn't necessarily good enough. And I think that the concerns that we had in the offseason kind of manifested there. And I think you have to feel really good about Josh Fryer grading out as a champion over at right tackle. I'm trying not to, repeat things that have already been said on the show, but again, the concerns that your veteran guards didn't necessarily get it done and were not graded out as champions. Your first year starting center, Carson Hinsman, was not a champion, but sounded like he was relatively close. As Ryan Day said, there were a few things, and we could ask what those were, and he would tell us, no, I'd rather not get into that. But when it comes to the run blocking, though, that's an issue that has been ongoing. I mean, I don't know if there's just some straight up flaws that happen in terms of Ryan Day's offensive system. But, I've talked about it until I'm blue in the face that Ohio State just cannot punch in like a 3rd and 2. That has just not been in their DNA for several years. And, Ohio State, lo and behold, they're going to sit there and they're going to run Devin Brown. Oh my God, oh no, they're not going to get anything because somebody came on from the blind side and tackled the running back or tackled Devin Brown from behind. And that was that. So, I mean, there's still a lot of things that are going to need to be sorted out, but I'm not going to lay down all of the ails of the offensive line on one guy or two guys. It's we fence, I guess, to make fun of Jim Harbaugh and his insanity. There are a lot of pieces in play there as to why there are those breakdowns. And you've got to sit there and you've got to wonder, is there somebody else on the roster that is going to be able to step in if player X or player Y is not able to get it together? And I just don't know.
Overreaction. Week 1 continues with a most specific comment about Sonny Styles in the chat that he's going to be a future Hall of Famer.
All righty then.
Well, maybe. I wouldn't bet on it. The odds are long. He's an extremely talented player. Let's let him develop. Billy Tuesday, how about this one? What turned Michigan around? Is Harbaugh finally hiring the right assistants? We talked about that many times here and elsewhere. Something Day is still learning.
Well, I will say that it's going to take a while before Day is able to hire his son as an assistant coach. So you're going to have to give him some time. You're going to have to be patient. And then once he hires the son, to continue to move him around to different positions each year as they look for ways to keep him employed. And also, Ryan Day doesn't have a brother in the NFL handing him assistance. So that is also a situation where you're going to have to kind of assess your thought process on how exactly Ryan Day is going to put together a coaching staff as good as Jim Harbaugh's. Also, you're going to need a former Ohio State running back to come back to coach the running backs as well. Eddie George out there being the head coach at Tennessee State. So we're going to have to be patient there for a while, I guess. Tony Alford, you're going to have to stay happy with him doing what he's doing. So look, I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying we got to be patient, wait for the timing when RJ Day is of coaching age, that sort of thing.
May want to remind a few people that recruiting is part of that responsibility. And these guys are doing okay.
Michigan, I mean, I've said this and, I'll say it again. Michigan really benefited from the extra year that was given due to 2020, and it really created a nice bubble on their roster in terms of some dudes that just actually get it and are playing well. But I don't look at Michigan's recruiting moving forward and necessarily see the same guys. So I think that, say what you will about what the 2023 game is going to be, I don't think that we're seeing something that's going to be Michigan winning 7 of the next 8 or anything like that. I think that having the glut that Michigan does in terms of what that 2020 extra year has given them has created a nice little situation for them. And for whatever reason, Ohio State has just not been able to crack that walnut. And, the Blake Corums of the world aren't going to be back in 24. And I just don't know if being the recruiting champion of the New England states is necessarily going to get you across the finish line moving forward.
Kevin, Tale of the Tape. When is that going to be released?
1 p.m. I sat down last evening and wrote it. Did not go and find the Youngstown State game on video. I just read the box score and made a couple of reenactments in my mind, and then just kind of went from there. But 1 o'clock, lots of words. Not sure if there's a lot of message, other than the fact that Ohio State is significantly more talented than the Penguins. And while Jim Tressel, back in the day, when the other 2 games happened, had a soft spot in his heart for Youngstown State, Ryan Day has no such soft spot. And given the opportunity to step on that Penguin's throat, if Penguins, I guess, have throats, he will.
What else do you have working?
Oh, sorry. I was reading. I'm being accused of excuses by Darren Talks Ball that everybody had the COVID year, specifically Michigan, after it bitched out of the game against Ohio State. Two can play this game. Just created had a lot of its key veteran guys come back, and Ohio State could have that COVID year, but Ohio State players go on to the NFL. They do not come back often. So thank you, Darren. We can continue to talk ball if you would like. I will be live on my own show on Friday, the Big Me kickoff, probably around 1 p.m. So to answer Mark's question, that is what I am working on and looking forward to Darren Talks Ball, finding me there at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle.
Tony.
I am going to be watching and contributing, not that Kevin knows this, to his show on Friday with a fake Michigan fan handle just to see if we can burst some blood vessels. So make sure you tune in for Big Me Kickoff Friday at 1 p.m. YouTube, Buckeye Huddle. Go check out that channel there. Also,
Who can I be?
Steve, you be you. That drives Kevin crazy enough.
Yeah.
He's fake Notre Dame guy.
Yeah, I'll be the Notre Dame guy.
Although there's enough real ones out there that that we can all laugh or roll our eyes at. I do a little bit of both. Sometimes it's amusing. Sometimes it's just incredibly annoying. And also, Tony, Sue had mentioned in the comments that you put together a string of interesting wide receiver notes and so forth. So if you could give us maybe one.
Yeah, no, I just tweeted about, Marvin Harrison had 2 catches for 18 yards this past week, and it was the end of the world. He had a game last year with 3 catches for 18 yards. Chris Olave in 2021 had a game with no catches and 2 others with 2 catches. Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think, had 2 or 3 games of 2 catches in 2021. He had 3 games of 2 catches in 2021 before he, and also the other 10 games caught like 89 passes. So, sometimes receivers just don't necessarily put up the normal numbers that they tend to. And so it's not the end of the world that Marvin Harrison only had 2 catches. He will, I think they'll be fine there. And you referenced earlier the low one in the end zone to Marvin at his feet. Like he caught one of those last year for CJ Stroud, that like almost that exact same pass where it was down by his ankles and he caught it and brought it up. And so, if he were to be as friendly with his old high school friend as he was with his college quarterback, maybe we'd be singing a different tune. But yeah, go check out Twitter.
And Marvin Harrison's okay physically, right?
Yep. As far as we know, I mean, we see him before and after every practice getting work on the practice field. So,
did anyone else get nicked up?
No,
not that I can think of. I mean, I think would be more concern just out of this week of practice and maybe Bloody Tuesday being Bloody Tuesday than anything that I saw coming out of the game itself.
Steve, what's going on over there at Bucknuts?
Well, I did go to a high school game Friday. I got to see Tavian St. Clair, so I'm going to post a story about that, the 2025 commitment, and he looked pretty good, even though he didn't throw for a lot of yards, just the way the game ended up. So that's cool. I'll have our game data page up here at some point talking about the Youngstown State game, my picks tomorrow. Dave Biddle and I were on our radio show this morning for about 20 minutes talking about a lot of these same topics, so check that out. And just getting ready for the weekend, Youngstown State, and that's most of what we got going on right now.
Our next show here at the Voice of College Football, Sooners Live, coming up. Sorry, the time is wrong. I didn't adjust the banner correctly there. Coming up at 12:30, which reminds me that Ohio State fans may have a little bit more respect for me now since I have dumped hosting responsibilities at the Michigan show for the last 6 or 7 weeks. So I've detached myself from the Michigan show. So I should be in your good graces. We do have Florida State at 6, Miami at 7. So we've got a full day. Plus I'm going to do a Texas Bama live stream preview at 8 tonight. So
there you go.
Lots of stuff there. Appreciate you guys. As always, we'll make it on back here most likely next Wednesday. Otherwise, keep track of those notifications. All right. See you next week.
See you guys.
Take care.